Hi everyone and welcome to the second episode of this devlog series. As a reminder, I'm building a small game for the mini fantasy GameJam 3 which theme is loop. In this game you're going to sow plants which you'll grow to the adult stage. Once they reach their final maturity stage, they can sow seedlings around them, and these seedlings will actually be repeating the exact series of actions the player did with their parent plant. Last episode we covered day 1 and 2, which were actually very productive days. In a blink of an eye we got our grid system working, we then created our plant object and started working on the player input. The player can now sow plants from its inventory, grow plants that have been sown, and once they become mature, the player can sow plants from a parent plant. We then worked a bit on polish, because who doesn't enjoy a bit of polish? And it was now time to implement the major mechanic in this game, which is recording the actions the player takes with a plant and replaying them with the child plants. Before we start this devlog, let me introduce you to the sponsor of this video, Wait, what is happening? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to Paz, a brand new official sponsor for this channel. Paz is an indie sound effects and music composer specialized in retro RPG sound effects. His work is inspired by the older Final Fantasy games, and I thought it would be fun to showcase his work by replacing the original music and sound effects from a battle from Final Fantasy II by his original music and sound effects. Yeah, I think that was really cool. So the complete bundle Paz is offering includes 37 asset packs at the unmatched price of $29.99. And by using the link in the description, you're getting a $5 discount on the original price, which is already hugely discounted. You might have noticed some of the packs in his complete bundle have a mini fantasy banner. This means the sound effects in those packs are custom made for mini fantasy. Here are a few examples of how the animations from mini fantasy creatures are perfectly synced with the sound effects in those packs. And of course, you've guessed it, the sound effects in those mini fantasy linked packs can also be used in any other context. So, mini fantasy enthusiast or not, go check out the content of the bundle through the link in the description. By using this link, you're supporting this channel and of course, another indie, hardworking human. Thanks to all of you who buy the pack, I wish you a pleasant exploration of what it contains, and thanks again to Paz for sponsoring this video. Back to the devlog now. I really don't know how I'm going to tackle the task of explaining how I did that system to you, but let's try it anyways. My first attempt consisted in recording the plant's status at each turn, and the child plant would copy the status from the parent plant at each turn. This system was pretty simple and clean, but had multiple flaws. First of all, it didn't record the series of actions the player took, so visually you couldn't really tell what was happening. And secondly, this system will not take into account any potential modifiers on the plant, which is something I plan to add in the future. So I went for another approach and I really don't know how to explain this. I guess that's the proof it's a bad system. I did struggle quite a bit to make it work. Weird stuff was happening, and so I added debug logs everywhere in my script, and I was getting lost in my debug logs, and so yeah, I'm pretty sure any one of you could make a better system than I did. So let's skip the boring part and acknowledge I have a functional system, but it's hard to read, unscalable, terribly optimized, all in all, a very fertile ground for a bug nest. So if we head back to our development plan, we now have the first 3 major gameplay elements that are implemented. Next, on step 4, the goal is to implement the plant conditions and effects. And I started with the plant conditions. Initially that was very large, but I narrowed it down to just some plants being able to be spawned on some types of ground. I learned how to store data in tiles, and that is just awesome. It is definitely something I'll be using in the future. Don't mind the ugly outline on that tree, that was experimental. Oh, and I also added that UI element that represents how many actions you have left with that plant for that turn. But as you can see now, I can set conditions on the plant. For example, here the tree cannot be sown in water tiles. Here, for testing purposes, the flower can only be sown in dirt. And guess what came crashing down again? Can I do that joke again? Well, I just did. The hovered tile, of course. And it's not the last time, so prepare to hear that joke again. In order to finish the day with a feeling of progress and accomplishment, I decided to add a new kind of plant, which is a reed. This one will, of course, only be able to grow in water. If you remember well, day 3 is actually a Sunday, and I did kind of work all day. Spoiler alert, this will have repercussions on the week to come. Whenever I work on a project, I regularly update my dev schedule and I take every potential opportunity to work outside. This is actually very rare. So the new plan to finish the game is the following. I actually started by point 3, which is setting the objectives for level of biomass and biodiversity. I then did the first part of point 2 and then point 4, continuing with point 1 and then point 5 and 6 and 7. So as you can see, my time outside resulted in a very accurate plan, but it actually helps me to have everything I have left to do on a single page. So I actually started with the UI for the objectives. Each level will feature at least a biomass objective and some will also feature a biodiversity objective. Once the UI was ready, I made it so the plants have a biomass value for each of their growth stage. Of course, the more energy required to go to the next growth stage, the higher the biomass increase. For the biodiversity objective, I actually have a diploma in bioengineering, so I had some remnants of what I learned there. In the ecology course, we learned about alpha, beta, and gamma biodiversity. I remembered about an index that represents the species evenness in an ecosystem. That means if one species dominates all the other ones, this index becomes lower. And that's exactly what I was needing. I made it work in my game, and as you can see here, as the vine number becomes increasingly big compared to the other species, the biodiversity index is decreasing. To finish off the objectives part, I created the level failed and level success menu. The level failed menu would trigger correctly when you're run out of turns. The level success menu triggers when both objectives are reached. It was now time to work on the special plant abilities. And as usual, I like starting with the UI, so here that means making a plant panel. So when you hover over a button to sow a plant, you get all the information about that plant. Its biomass value when it reaches adulthood, the default number of seeds it has, the total amount of energy to reach adulthood, and if it has a special ability. One of the abilities I imagined was increasing the player's seeds per turn. So I started by limiting the player's seeds per turn, and I also created a progress bar for when the player can access a new seed. The special ability for the reed is to increase the rate at which this progress bar fills. I then worked on the other plant effect. So the white flower buffers the amount of energy ticks you get by using one action with a plant, and the red flower increases the amount of actions you get for each plant. These buffs affect any plant placed nearby those flowers. To hand the information to the player that a buff was triggered, I used particles again, using the same seed and energy sprites. This looks okay in my opinion, not impactful enough, but okay. Now all these little flowers and vines will not get you to win the game with the biodiversity objective. For this, I wanted to offer two strategies to the player, one using trees and the other one using vegetables. Trees can offer a huge amount of biomass. However, they require a huge amount of energy to grow to adulthood, and they block the sowing of new plants around them. That's a tricky part for the player. Vegetables allow you to harvest them whenever they reach their final maturity stage, and that's very interesting as the child plants will repeat those harvests. You do, however, need to harvest the plant at least once before sowing a new one, or the child plant will not harvest anything. Vegetables, of course, need to be sown in dirt, so that is their drawback. I've covered a lot of different games on this channel, and as you might have noticed, I do appreciate a lot of different game genres. However, I don't think I've covered a real-time strategy game yet. As some of you might already know, this is the game genre that I originally discovered video games with. Age of Empires 3 was the very first video game I ever played. Here's a nostalgia injection for all of you that grew up in the early 2000s. I remember when I played this game, I was very young, and I spent the first 3 months playing with the same civilizations, the Spanish. When I discovered you can actually change civilization and pick another one, my mind literally blew. Anyways, this is not the game I want to cover now, because this game is set not in the past, but in a distant future. Planetary Annihilation Titans Edition is, you guessed, a real-time strategy game set in space. What sets this one apart from many other RTS is that you're fighting on 4 layers simultaneously. Land and water, of course, but also air and orbit. It's a pretty deep game, there are lots of different units, and if you're subject to game nausea when it comes to a lot of 3D rotation, avoid this title. However, if like me, you feel very excited about playing on multiple planets at the same time, go grab this game, it's really good. You can have a really fun time playing against the AI, and there is still an active player base if you're into multiplayer. Why is it called Titans Editions? Well, because there are Titans, extremely powerful units that can obliterate your army in a blink of an eye. Why is it called Annihilation? Because you can literally turn a whole planet into a laser beam planet destroyer, or you can also build huge engines on small asteroids and send them crash on your opponent's planet. Oh, and there's also nukes, but that's like so basic when you can throw planets at each other. There's also a sequel announced to this game that seems to add in some automation gameplay elements. The trailer looks awesome, we'll see what they come up with. Heading back to our final list, we now have all the gameplay elements done. The only remaining stuff to add is a main menu, some content, and a tutorial. And I started with the levels. The plan was to create between 3 and 5 levels. And for the levels visual, I used the floating islands tileset. I don't know why I am highly addicted to that tileset. It's exactly the same tileset I'm using in Hidden Tactics. By the way, go wishlist it if you haven't already. It's the very first team game I'm working on, a PvP tactical auto battler. I'm tackling a real challenge here with multiplayer in my first game, so that would be great if I could get your support with those wishlists. So here I'm trying to balance the first level, and I realized very quickly I wanted to see what's the biomass objective.
A few moments later.
Now I was ready and set to start balancing the first level. There are a lot of parameters here to balance the game. How many seeds the players start with, which plants there are in each level, how many seeds of each plant, the seed growth rate, single growth stage, default number of seeds, tiles where they can sow their child plants, and the level's biodiversity and biomass objectives. I decided to procrastinate and add music and sound effects. So I found this song in my stock music provider. I used Paz's sound effect, which makes the feel very arcadey, and I like it a lot. I did balance the volume levels later on, don't worry. I also added nature ambient sounds from his pack. Each level picks one at random, so you'll have a random ambience in each level. Okay, now I think I can't procrastinate anymore. I have to create the levels. Anyone wants to create the levels for me? I'm done. I'm hiring someone, a level designer. You're paid 5 things a month. I wanna go work on Hidden Tactics. There are these awesome new creatures for Hidden Tactics, and I'm stuck on this. Alright everyone, I hope to get that project finished by today, because I didn't measure how frustrating it would be not to work on my main project for so long. And once I passed the development frenzy, I started feeling bored, done with this project. And the frustration of keeping my main projects aside started growing. So shortening up this project by 1 day, I hope to get it done today. There is 1 level left. There's 1 level left to build. The main menu, a restart functionality right on the level, and a small tutorial. Then build the project and upload it on itch, and then I'm done. So let's see if I can get this done by today. Building level 4, I caught myself actually having fun playing this game. I think there can actually be multiple strategies to win the level, and I think I nailed the puzzle game experience, where all your actions must be carefully thought in order to win the level. Although I'm not really a puzzle game enthusiast, so after 1 hour of trying to balance this level correctly, I was happy to say all my levels were built. A critical part of the puzzle game experience is making a mistake during a level and restarting. So I added this restart functionality on the pause menu, which is actually the only functionality of the pause menu as I planned this morning. That will make life easier for the player. I then worked very hard and very long on the main menu. You'll see when you try the game, it looks awesome in my opinion. One thing I could not leave aside is the tutorial, because there are quite a few mechanics, and a player arriving on this game that hasn't seen these devlogs might be completely lost. So that was actually the longest task of the day. I was then finally ready to build the game and upload it on itch. I learned to build the game on WebGL, so you can now play the game in your browser. It's very easy. And to be honest with you, I think it was like 3 PM when I uploaded it, but I was just so happy to be done with this project, and I could now enjoy my afternoon. Which consisted in getting prepared for our very first reenacting camp in the Vikings era. This weekend was a really fun time. It was all about fighting, drinking, and eating. Alright, so I learned 2 main things with this project. First of all, I think now after almost 1 year of full-time game dev, I feel confident enough with creating a game from start to finish. Here, at the end of this game jam, when I arrived at the point I had to create the main menu and like the tutorial, etc., it really felt more of a chore than learning. I feel like the primary point of a game jam is learning, and since I felt I wouldn't learn anything by just recreating a menu I've already done in multiple games in the past, well, I just didn't do it. And that's fine, I guess. And secondly, I think I do like game jams, especially that initial dev frenzy part where you have to create all the systems. So keeping my future game jams short is a good starting point, focusing on creating a mechanic or a gameplay experience and not necessarily a full game with multiple levels and balancing, etc. So who knows, I just saw GMTK released his game jam presentation video. Maybe I'll join it, maybe not. Let me know in the comments if that is something that would entertain you. In the meanwhile, I might organize a game jam myself, specifically designed for this community, if that is something you'd be interested about. Stay tuned on the next announcements by subscribing to this channel. I just finished 8 days of video editing with the tutorial and those 2 game jam videos, so I'm really excited to go back to game dev. Oh, and I almost forgot, you can play the game I created on this game jam. I'll put the link in the description. It's really just a small game, don't expect too much about it. So now, double press play.